You're 10 years old. It's summer. Your shirt sticks to your back. You hear the jingle before you see it, like Pavlov's bell, high-pitched and cruel. Then the white truck turns the corner, slow, like it's stalking. The ice cream man. You run for quarters. So does every other kid on the block. No one questions the man behind the wheel because he's smiling, and he smells like chocolate and peppermint oil, and that's enough. Dean Corll. That was his name. Only you didn't know that. You just knew the truck and the candy and the way he'd hand out treats without charging sometimes, like some kind of sugar messiah. Mr. Corll was just the guy whose mom owned a candy factory, the guy who let you inside sometimes, the guy who seemed lonely. That's all. That's all it ever is, until it isn't. It started in the late 60s, Houston, Texas, a flat, hot grid of sameness. New neighborhoods sprouting like tumors, strip malls, brown lawns, plywood homes. Nothing about it screamed horror story, unless you looked too close. Dean was the quiet type. Veterans called it the 1,000-yard stare, but Dean hadn't served, just looked like he had. Always a little pale, not in a sick way, in a chemically scrubbed kind of way. He'd worked in his mom's candy factory since he was a teenager, and when she moved it to Houston Heights, Dean followed. A family man, sort of. His mom said he was the most polite boy she'd ever known. Of course she'd say that. He didn't like loud people. He didn't like chaos. He didn't like being touched unless he initiated it. But he loved boys. Teenage boys. Boys who were lean and shaggy and smelled like motor oil and burnt weed and bad decisions. Boys who didn't belong to anyone. And there were a lot of those in the Heights. No one looked twice when they disappeared. Houston police didn't even have a proper missing persons unit at the time. Just runaways. So when a kid vanished, it wasn't news, it was statistics. Here's where it gets weird. Here's where it gets human. Dean didn't work alone. There was David Brooks, the first recruit. He was just 12 when he met Dean. Dean gave him money, let him hang around, bought him things, became this twisted father figure, except with boundary issues and a growing appetite. By the time David was 15, he was in too deep to back out. Dean paid him $200 for each boy he could lure back to the apartment. They were runaways, he'd say, just giving them a place to crash. But David knew. You don't drag someone into a room with soundproof walls and handcuffs unless something else is coming. Then came Elmer Wayne Henley, a different breed. Henley was 17, a little wild, a little dumb, but not heartless. When Dean first propositioned him, Henley said no. But his family was broke, and Dean knew how to exploit broke. Eventually, Elmer cracked, joined the operation, started bringing boys to the house. It wasn't just one house. Dean moved around a lot, rented places, lived in trailers, even stayed in a boat storage unit for a while. It didn't matter where. The setup was always the same. A torture board, 8 feet long, covered in plastic, handcuffs mounted on each end. A shelf with tools, nylon rope, surgical tape, glass rods, pliers. One of the rooms had soundproofing, but Dean called it the fun room. The word fun doesn't belong in this story, but here we are. The boys they brought were gagged, stripped, tied down. Some were kept alive for hours, others for days. Dean liked to use a telephone to taunt their parents while they screamed. He took photos, he kept mementos. If a body couldn't be buried right away, he'd wrap it in plastic and stick it in a closet. He didn't stop. For 3 years, he didn't stop. From 1970 to 1973, boys vanished off the streets of Houston. They disappeared at gas stations, arcades, swimming pools. Sometimes there were brothers, sometimes best friends. Dean made Henley participate, made him watch, eventually made him help. Henley said he was scared, but he didn't want to die. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. Doesn't matter. What matters is July 8th, 1973. That's when it ended. Henley had brought over another boy for Dean. His name was Timothy, but Henley also brought along a girl. This wasn't normal. Dean didn't like girls. He didn't want girls. But Henley insisted. She needed a place to crash just for the night. Dean was pissed. Real pissed. But he let it go. At least for a while. The three of them fell asleep. Around 3 a.m, Henley woke up with Dean's gun in his face. All three were tied up, gagged. Dean told Henley he'd gone too far, that it was time to pay, that after this, they were done. Except Henley talked, said he'd help, said he'd torture and kill the girl himself, if Dean wanted. Anything to earn his trust back. It worked. Dean cut him loose, handed him the knife, then turned his back. And that's when Henley grabbed the pistol and fired, once in the back, then again, then again. Dean collapsed, naked, bleeding on the floor, shot 6 times, dead before he hit the linoleum. It should have ended there, but it didn't, because what Henley told the police next unraveled everything. He confessed to killing Dean, told them why, told them what Dean had done, led them to the boathouse first, said there were bodies buried under the floor wrapped in plastic. The cops thought he was crazy, then they opened the concrete. The smell hit first, then the flies, then the bones. 1, 2, 3. By the time they were done, they'd found 27 bodies. Some were buried under the boat shed, some under Dean's last rental home. Others were dumped at a beach called High Island. One was just bones in a bag behind a wall. Dean Corll was dead, but the cleanup had just started. Some victims were never identified. Others were misidentified at first. The technology wasn't great. Records were sloppy. And remember, Houston didn't track missing kids properly. Some families never even knew to look. It was the worst case of serial murder in American history at the time. No one expected it, especially not from the polite Candyman who gave out free sweets and waved at kids. David Brooks got life in prison. So did Elmer Wayne Henley. Brooks died in 2020 from COVID complications. Henley's still alive, still behind bars. He gives interviews sometimes, smiles, jokes. He even sells art from prison, paintings of birds and beaches and weird grinning skulls. People buy them, maybe because they want to own a piece of evil, or maybe because they're just bored. Dean never gave a motive, never left a note, never said sorry. Maybe he didn't think what he did was wrong. Maybe he thought the world was wrong for making him hide. Maybe he didn't think at all. The scariest monsters aren't the ones who enjoy it. They're the ones who think they're owed it. People still remember the white van, still remember the jingle, still remember walking into the house and seeing the floor bulge, because Dean had run out of places to hide them. So he just started piling the bodies behind walls, under boards, anywhere they'd fit. And the neighbors, they never said they smelled anything, but they all took the candy. Every one of them.